It takes more than spending 3 hours to understand your SaaS vendor's pricing model, only to conclude that it is unknowable and you have wasted your time. To be a great engineer. This.
Just in life.
Yeah. This is Soft Skills Engineering, episode 350. I'm your host, Dave Smith.
I'm your host, Jamison Dance.
Soft Skills Engineering is a weekly advice podcast for software developers and occasionally those who want to understand how much things cost and conclude that you cannot.
Imagine if like gas worked that way. Like there's not a price. You have like tiered usage-based billing that also depends on your enterprise contract you have negotiated with 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
You get a certain amount of refund credits if you
Yes.
spend up to X dollars. And
As soon as you see the word credit, you know you are never going to understand your actual costs.
yeah. It usage-based billing sounds so simple. Like,
Yeah.
you use a thing and then you pay for it.
Just pay for
Yeah.
what you use.
Yeah.
And then spend the next 6 months trying to figure out what you paid for.
Yeah. And if you used it, actually. What does use mean here?
Yeah. Also, I'm going to have to do a commit to a certain amount of spending 2 years in advance.
Yeah. Pay for what you use, and you will use this much.
Yeah. No, for me, it's more like pay for what you use and a $300,000 a year contract that I negotiate with you.
Yeah.
Whichever is
Pay
greater.
for your audacity of wanting to use our product. Pay for it.
Pay for my
With your
enterprise sales
suffering.
rep's time. That's what I'm
Yeah.
paying for to use.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't say what the usage was.
That's true.
It's time on the phone with the sales rep.
Yeah.
All right.
That's not what this show is about, though.
Do you want to thank
Should I
our
thank our-
patrons?
So much I want to. Thank you to Systematic Guy, Anthony Ungaro, Kyle Boss, Connie Lee, Santa Hopar, Noah Fraser-Logue, Kent C. Dodds, Jenny Kim, Owen Shardo, Craig Motlin, I Love Mavis, The Stochastic Parrot, Alice Jost, Ganandon Hooten, Ohio, patreon.com.au, we're hiring, Ira Chan, Monkey Face Emoji, Jonathan King, testingisdocumenting.org, Oladapo Fadye, Will Angel, pronounced like that town in Ohio / Scotland with an unpronounceable name, Ernga, Nick Hathaway, Travis Sanders, Braden Keynes, John Grant, Bartek, Tatkowski, Cody Sell, Nick Cantar, and Philip John Basile. Thank you. Thank you so much to this crew, this group of people / places / companies or domain names, at least. If you would like to support the podcast, you can go to softskills.audio and click support us on Patreon, where any dollar amount will get you invited to our Slack team. And the joy of interacting with a group of other people who have contributed any dollar amount, which is a pretty good filter for good folk, I have to say. And if you contribute up to a certain level, then you will get a one-time or weekly shout-out. Thank you.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
It is above a certain level, Jamison. And
Yeah.
we're switching to a
greater
credit.
than
We're
or
switching-
equal.
We're switching to a credit system.
It's usage-based, so it depends on the
Right.
amount of characters in the message. But
Yes.
yeah, there's
Oh
a
my
commit, a minimum commit, minimum spend.
It's 4,700 characters, 4,700 credits per character. There's a special
Yeah.
rate for emojis, and if you go above the free tier, there's a new rate. And also for really high volume characters, there's a different rate. It's all very simple.
I'm getting a like free-to-play mobile game vibe from this.
Yes.
Is there some way to get gems?
Yeah, definitely there's going to be gems. You can go to our store and exchange your credits for gems or coins.
Yeah. We promise not to email you and say, hey, I've noticed you can optimize stuff, where optimize means you pay us a lot more money.
Yes. To go faster.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll enunciate more clearly, I guess. I don't know. Somehow it'll be good for you.
Yeah, don't
but
worry.
Also, you'll pay us a lot more money.
Right. Definitely the last thing. Definitely the last thing.
Some cynicism coming out.
Okay.
Let's get to the questions.
All right. This comes from an anonymous listener who says, hi, have you ever been through a technical interview and bombed a question? I did, and it feels awful. Especially when the question was easy, but I couldn't focus due to time pressure and stress. Do you have any tips for dealing with interview anxiety and get rid of this bitter feeling if the interview goes bad? Thanks. Oh my goodness, so relatable.
I think I have one question I bombed the most stuck in my mind, and it was a brain teaser puzzle that I've talked about on this podcast before because it's stuck in my mind.
Okay.
And my tip for dealing with it and getting rid of the bitter feeling is transfer all of my upset feelings about not doing well on this question in front of other people to anger at the company
Oh, perfect.
for daring to ask me a question I would do poorly on. I didn't do bad on it. They showed poor judgment in asking such a stupid question, where stupid means I don't know how to answer.
I'm not smart enough to answer it.
I do have, I think, legitimate objections to how that is a good filter for is someone going to be a good software developer or not. But it's hard for me to objectively step back and separate those legitimate objections from the grumpiness at just struggling for half an hour on a whiteboard in front of people
who are just sitting there with their arms folded,
sighing,
staring.
And they keep asking what seem to be very pointed questions about like, well, what if you considered this thing? And I'm like, then I would be stuck.
Then
I would
remain stuck if I considered that.
Yeah, so that's worked pretty well for me. I don't think I've gone through a like technical gauntlet interview process like what you'd find at one of the mega tech companies of like you really have to study hard and they're this genre of tough technical questions. I don't think I've gone through that, and I imagine I would fail pretty hard on some of those. So.
And that's when I bombed. In fact, I wrote a whole blog post about this experience 7 years ago, and I never posted it. It's still. I'm just pulling it up and looking at it right now. It's sitting in my drafts, and it was the very first question.
I see you use the transfer all of your failure to anger at the company to fuel a blog post.
A blog post which has remained unpublished.
Why not publish it?
I don't know. Well, so I probably should. At this point, it's probably okay to publish it.
Yeah.
So this was at one of the big tech co's, and I basically described my interview experience through all the sessions. There were, 6 sessions, including a lunch. It was an all-day event. It was in Seattle, if that gives any clues as to where. Anyway, it was rough. So I remember I got up to the whiteboard. This is one of those questions where you write your code with a marker in your hand, as we do as practitioners. That's totally normal. The question was fairly simply stated, and I actually even though I absolutely bombed the question and didn't end up getting the right answer, A, I still got the job. And B, I decided in that moment, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to answer this question. So I started... This is kind of my recovery mode when I can't answer a technical question. It's not like a knowledge question, it's more like a solve a problem question. My fallback is explore. If you can't answer the question with a solution, fully explore the problem instead. And so I did. I actually got up on the whiteboard and started writing unit tests. So I wrote out like 6 unit tests, and I then checked with the interviewer, like, hey, does this adequately express the problem space that we're trying to solve? And the interviewer was kind of like, yes, and that was pretty much the only word he said to me the whole session. Like he just was completely...
And then you ran out of time. You're like, oops, guess I can't reveal my solution.
Oh, I had so many good ideas.
But it would pass these tests.
Yes. And then I started writing the code and I realized, oh man, I'm in trouble. Like I could not provide an answer. And so I kind of got a portion of it implemented on the whiteboard and then failed and then failed and then failed. And then we ran out of time. And I can only attribute the fact that I got a job offer to the fact that I put in a lot of work to fully understand the scope of the problem and just demonstrate that I can really work through a problem space, enough that the interviewer was willing to give me a green check mark. So it was rough though.
Yeah. I do remember a technical question that I bombed on, and I think I felt a kind of similar vibe to that puzzle or brain teaser question, but much less strong because the question was much more focused on writing code to solve a problem.
As opposed to an aha moment.
As opposed to it was literally like a riddle.
Yeah. Do you remember? Do you remember that question?
I do. I think if I look it up. It's the bridge and torch problem.
Oh yes.
So I guess it's not a riddle. It's not a brain teaser, and you can translate this into like technical I don't know,
Oh,
requirements. But
that is totally a brain
sure, I
teaser,
did not.
in my opinion.
I didn't do it. Yeah. And I would probably do poorly on other problems of this nature,
Me too.
like the people getting across the river in a boat, or
Yep.
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah,
Don't
I
do well
hate
at
those
these.
questions. You're right to feel bitter.
Some people like them, and I could see how there's potential overlap from being amazing at these questions
Yeah.
and amazing at like defining and solving hard, complex technical problems. But
Maybe.
boy, is there not.
It's not obvious.
There's a lot of ways to be good at software that aren't solving the bridge and torch problem.
And vice versa.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe
yeah.
maybe more importantly, you could be really good at solving the bridge and torch problem. Like, wow, I've never seen such an amazing explanation to that problem that only has one answer.
Yeah.
That I'm actually, I guess what people are testing for when they give that question in an interview is, have you Googled this brain teaser in the past?
I mean, there are some questions like that. I think somebody could figure this out, but that was not me in this interview.
Yeah, I don't do well with those either myself.
I did have an interview that had a graph traversal problem, and that was a more technical question with a more like, I don't know, you traverse graphs sometimes in software, and I failed at it. I think it was like a graph coloring problem, if I'm trying to remember.
Oh, was it the bipartite problem?
Probably.
And I think I know the name of the person who gave you that, and I think it was at a company I was working at.
Yeah, I think I interviewed at a company that
That's
Dave
right.
worked at.
And my boss loved that.
Offer.
He loves that question. Bipartite. It happens to be applicable to graph coloring, or to map coloring.
Map coloring, that's right.
I think. But yeah, bipartite, it's separating a graph into nodes that are connected directly versus I can't remember. It's like it's an okay problem.
Yeah, that one felt less unfair. Yeah. Like, I don't care about this, and I think you're dumb for caring about it. Like, I could see how you could care about it, but I did not do well. I did not solve it correctly in my memory. Did not get a job offer.
Well, that was because I worked there, and they asked for my input.
You blocked my application. I think this was before the podcast, so this was before we made a truce over this.
Before we agreed we would not block each other's applications anymore.
Yeah. But I think that one felt less unfair and more like, I don't know, maybe I should go learn some of this stuff. And then I didn't. Right. And then I, not learn. I don't know. I took CS classes. I did graph things, but I did not reproduce them correctly on the whiteboard. And then I just interviewed at more places and like passed other interviews. And that probably helped my confidence more than if I had gone back and rigorously solved the problem that I got stuck on. Although that could help too. It's just not going to do any, I don't know. You're not going to be able to go back to the interview and say, hey, remember when I failed? I'm ready to pass it now.
Hey, remember 9 years ago when you gave me this interview question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the more you interview and the more successes that you can accumulate in your success bin, the less bad you will feel about the ones you failed. Understanding that failure at interview is just kind of a natural part of doing the interview. And the more failures you can rack up and the more successes you can, hopefully you can rack up more successes than failures. That will help.
Yeah.
But if you can just get even a few great successes, I think it'll go really a long way to not feeling so bad about the ones you bombed.
Yeah. I think passing an interview is a lot to do with the combination of the kinds of things that people are evaluating in the interview and the kinds of things that you present in an interview.
Yeah.
And ideally passing an interview would mean that you can do the job well, but in practice it doesn't mean that. It means like you look good on the stuff they ask you in the interview, which is not often what the job involves.
And maybe that's the other technique, is telling yourself and believing that your own self-worth and value as a human being, and even professional skill as a software engineer, is not really gauged by the outcomes of these interviews. It is a non-deterministic test about your skill that doesn't hold a ton of water. And if you can convince yourself of that, and I believe that, then I think you will have less, you will feel less bad.
I think another thing that would help me, I haven't done this, but now I want to, is just go pick the developers you respect the most and ask them to tell you about a time they bombed an interview.
Yeah.
And guaranteed all of them will have one. Like
Yeah.
the finest developers in the world,
Mm-hmm.
however you define that, have all just bombed technical interviews.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a universal thing.
It absolutely is. And I mean, you and I both have stories, and we're good developers.
I'm not
right?
the finest developer in the world.
Are we?
I'll admit it. It's out there.
You deserved.
I'm finally
to
coming
fail,
clean.
to fail those interviews.
Some of them I certainly did.
Me too. I have a couple more ideas.
Yeah.
One is try to get an opportunity to be on the other side of the interview table. And you'll start to calibrate what good interviewing looks like. And you might find that you're not that bad. You know, you'll see a lot of people.
You don't know what bad looks like.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
You haven't seen the full extrema of good and bad. You've only seen your own performance in an interview, but get on the other side of it. And it'll also give you some empathy because you'll see so many people struggling in the hot seat that you'll start to feel better about your own performance there, I think.
I like that. Tips for dealing with interview anxiety. I honestly don't have a strategy beyond, if you can, getting more interviews so that failure in an individual interview, while painful, is less of a blow to your job prospects.
Yeah.
If you have one interview lined up,
and it's your only chance.
Yeah, then I mean you're going to be you will likely be anxious no matter what the situation is going into an interview. But if it's like, I have to pass this or I do not have a job, then those stakes are pretty high. And
yeah, there's nothing you could do to not feel nervous about that.
Yeah, most people would feel nervous. And
yeah,
I don't know, other tips.
I have another tip.
Yeah, if you do a lot of them, you get better at interviewing. There's a skill you don't practice a lot in the real day-to-day of talking about the kind of work that you do instead of doing the kind of work you do.
That's right. Talking about the work instead of doing the work. That's a good point. That's exactly what I was going to suggest next. I have a good friend who asked, he identified in himself a weakness for certain types of interview questions. And he knew that I had been on the other side of the table on hundreds of interviews over the recent years for that specific type of question. So he actually asked me if I would interview him in a mock interview. And I did. We spent 1 hour in a room together, and I gave him a marker and a whiteboard, and I just threw one of my interview questions that I've given to a whole bunch of candidates. We worked through it, and it was great. And then afterwards, this is the great part about practicing with a friend, afterwards, we could talk about what he did. Whereas in a real interview context, they will very rarely give you that kind of detail. And so I was making notes while we interviewed, and I had a whole bunch of, because I've seen a bunch of people work this problem before, I had a whole bunch of ideas for him from things I had seen other people do. And it was great. And so I'm like, it's way less pressure when you're doing a mock interview with your friend. And if you can get accustomed to the pressure, or let me put it another way, generate synthetic pressure the same way you generate synthetic load for your software when the stakes are low.
Yeah. I like it. Maybe put together a interview practice group at work of all the disaffected engineers that want to go get other jobs.
Hey, we're practicing interviewing. Your manager asks,
we're practicing working
what?
at the next place we're going to work.
What are you doing?
Don't worry about it. Have we answered the question?
I think so. Great. Good luck. You're not alone. And there are ways to lessen the anxiety, but not eliminate it.
Yes. Should I read our next question?
Go for it.
This is from a listener named Dustin who asks, do tech companies or recruiters dig into individual backgrounds during the hiring process? Also, is there a bias towards part-time students versus full-time? To keep it short, I'm 28, and from 18 to 22, I was homeless and involved with specific substances. Ultimately, I got out on my feet around the age of 23, and now I'm currently attending university part-time while working full-time. I have noticed a bias from full-time students against part-time students, and I wonder if this happens as well in regards to employers.
Oh, great question.
Yeah. There's a couple questions here. One is about kind of background in general, and another one is about what
biases,
what kind of student you are, I guess, or what kind is the wrong way to put it. How you attended school? I don't know. Are you a part-time or full-time student?
The number of hours, right?
Shorter way.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the easy one. I think let's tackle that one first. Well, it seems easy to me. We'll see in a minute here. But once you get out of university and employers bring you on, whether you were a part-time or full-time student, in my experience, has never come up. It doesn't matter in the least. In fact, virtually nothing I achieved, nothing I worked so hard for in my university days has had any airtime at all in my professional life once I got my first job. But until I got my first job, it was like everything, you know?
Yeah.
Although even in that process, I don't think the interviewers cared if I was part-time or full-time.
Yeah. I'm assuming that you're working full-time as a software developer while going to school part-time. And in that case, I think you're probably better off than if you were working full-time and going to school full-time.
Well, yeah.
I would be wary of hiring a software developer who is attending school full-time just because that's a lot of time commitment and it'd be hard to do both those things at the same time.
Do you think there's any bias one way or another on the hiring front when you're getting ready to graduate?
I don't think so. I think the fact that you have full-time professional experience way outweighs.
Well said.
Frankly, probably even whether you went to school or not for it, but also what type of attendance you had.
Yeah, I agree with that. I haven't seen that.
It sucks that the students are being snooty about it, though.
It does.
Dumb.
That's kind of silly. I wonder.
But also,
there could be some
they're
ageism
18,
going on here.
so.
Instead of like, it might not be part-time, full-time, fully. It could also be, you're 28. That's so old.
I remember there was a 26 or 20, like later 20s student who had worked for a while and then was going back to school to get a CS degree.
Mm-hmm.
But they were cool. We liked them, but they did stick out a little bit as someone different.
How do you do, fellow young people?
Yeah. They were very efficient at getting through school.
Yeah,
and you could tell they were there to get the stuff done.
Yeah, I'm not here to goof off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I am. I'm here to goof off a little
what
bit.
else? Well, I don't understand what else there is. All right. Should we talk about background checks? That was another question here.
Yeah.
Do recruiters or companies dig into your individual backgrounds during the hiring process? What do you think, Jamison? Have you seen this?
I have gone through background checks. I remember very clearly the background check at the Mega Tech Co. because the UI was, or mega company I worked for.
Yeah.
The UI to start it was really painful.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe I said something like, sure, you can check my background for some of the other jobs I've worked, but I don't remember it at all. So I actually don't remember directly from experience how much my background has been checked.
Yeah. I can tell you
I think we do background checks at my current employer.
I'll bet you do.
I think I did one.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's so common that most applicant tracking systems, that's the software they use to track hiring and stuff, most of them have this feature built in where you can just click a button and boom, you get an automatic background check and it'll do like a criminal records check and things like that. So that's pretty common in my experience, just as a built-in part of the process. So that will probably come up depending on if you have a criminal record. That will probably be something you have to answer. I haven't seen any
candidates fail them. So I don't know what
I've seen
happens.
I've had about like
or I don't know, fail is the wrong word. Be flagged for something.
Yeah, exactly. So I probably hired 30 or 40 people over the last couple of years, and I think probably 60-70% of them just came through and it just puts a green mark by their name and there's nothing to see here. And then the other third, it will say things like, there are things in here you might want to look at, and you click into it and it'll say stuff, and then you got to make a judgment call. So it will probably come up. This will probably be something you need to prepare for. Like if I had, let's talk about what some of these substances might be. Obviously we're talking about diet soft drinks, I think.
Yes, the famed Diet 7-Up addiction.
That's probably, you're going to need a story to talk about that, some kind of narrative to put the mind at ease of your recruiter or hiring manager, that whatever it was in your past and that you are no longer involved in that and have no intention of ever becoming involved in it again, whether true or not. Just kidding.
You say as you stroke the case of Diet 7-Up
yes.
under your desk.
They say that
soft about this drink.
Nothing soft about soft drinks. Oh man. But yeah, you'll need to prepare. Okay. And I would probably role play that and to be ready for the question. Like, hey, it says here you had a criminal case or whatever, conviction of this or that. Be ready to talk about it. And you might want to practice it with a friend so they can.
Would you bring it up ahead of time?
No, I would
or just
not.
let it pop
I would
up?
not, because there's a chance you roll the dice and it doesn't actually come up, right? And I would bank on that chance. Don't force it to come up, the right number on the dice.
Yeah.
Bank on it not coming up, because it might not. I'm unfortunate because I have the opposite problem. My name is David Smith. So anytime anyone runs my background, they get like 400 criminal records hits for people who aren't me. And so my story is always, it wasn't me. It's like, must have been some other Dave Smith. And they're like, okay. No, actually, sometimes that turns into a pain. I'm like, look, I've had to go back. I've had to go the rounds a couple times. Like I remember once signing a lease agreement.
That it wasn't you.
Yeah, it took a while. Anyway.
That must be famed serial tulip ripper-upper Dave Smith, not me. Responsible Dave Smith.
I never rip up tulips.
Yeah. I think you should expect some offers to get rescinded from this. It just, I don't know, probably will happen. There might be some legal protection depending on your background and the place you live, but certainly in some countries it will be an option to say, actually, we don't want to hire this person because of some background stuff.
And they may not even tell you, right? They might just say,
they might just go dark. Yeah. Might just ghost you.
And sometimes they do the offer first and then run background checks.
It's contingent on passing a background check. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes they won't even say it out loud, and then they'll just, at that point, it's going to be very clear what happened to you, right? Like you'll know.
Yeah.
So it might happen. I hope it doesn't happen.
Also, sometimes the check happens after you accept the offer.
Oh boy. Well, yeah. Interesting. That's true. I'm thinking about that. That's true. That is how I think it usually works, actually, because it takes some time.
Then, and you might need to. So one way, it might be a numbers game. You might need more offers to end at one accepted offer that will deal with the stuff in your background check. And you might also have to accept multiple offers and then reject some of them. And that's tricky because they usually have a start date. And then if I don't know, there's some, it'll be more complicated. Yeah,
that is more complicated because you got to commit to a date and then they're going to start the background check after you accept the offer. And then, oh man, that's tough. You also makes it harder to shop offers against each other too, because ideally you'd get 3 offers and you don't have to answer any of them until you've gotten all 3 of them, or some whatever number you want, right?
Yeah. So this is why I'm wondering what the cost of revealing it at offer time is.
That's a good point, because if they're going to say no to you because of something in your past, they're either going to say no to it now, or they're going to say no to it after they discover it, which may happen because you ran a background check, or it may happen a year into the job. So maybe we should, it would be best to disclose that earlier rather than finding out 6 months into your job that it was a deal breaker. You know?
Because your point was it might not show up on the background check. You might be able to test that. I'm sure you can run your own background check on yourself.
That's a good idea.
And see what pops up.
Yeah, an easy way to do that would be to go to one of these landlord websites where you are you could pretend to own a rental property and then run background checks for people. Just run it for yourself.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like we're getting dangerously into legal territory here. And as we all know, we are space lawyers, not Earth lawyers.
Yes. So we will give valid space law advice. And I think my valid space law advice is, if you feel like stuff will show up on the background check, I would bring it up when there's an offer extended to you, because at that point they want you. They've committed some amount already.
Right.
And if you do it in the interview stage, then that might they might weigh your interview differently and say, all right, we're going to offer this other candidate instead or whatever. They've invested a bit in you already.
Yeah.
And if you have a really coherent, clear story for why this happened and why it's not going to affect your future performance, then that's the time to kind of prep them for it, maybe. So hey, this is something I had in my past, and I've learned and grown a lot since then. It's been X number of years since I've whatever, and here's the systems I have set up to help me, and I don't know. I would workshop that and practice it, but tell them I want to let you know in case stuff comes up on the background check, and can you help me understand how you would react to that? Is this a deal breaker for you, or do you feel like we can still work together?
Right.
Because I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either. I mean, it might depend a little on the thing.
Well, yeah, I guess you probably want to say you don't think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's like white collar crime from deleting someone's source code
yes.
at your previous software developer company, then it'd be a bit of a
I embezzled millions
problem.
of credits and gems. I used to work for Candy
enterprise
Crush.
sales platform. Yeah.
And I have so many coins now. None of
There
them
was
are
that
Bitcoin.
guy who worked at Microsoft who I think stole a bunch of like Microsoft Store gift cards, figured out how to generate them.
Oh man.
Did you hear that story ever?
No.
Yeah. That seems like it could be relevant to a future
that could
employer.
be yeah. Oh boy.
But yeah, I mean, I think one gut feel based thing I'll say is I think in software you might have a better time finding work that is okay with stuff coming up in the background check, depending on what it is, because of the like fancy white collar privilege that gets associated with software development.
Right. Also, the risk levels are lower. You know, I mean, if you and when I say risk,
you're
levels,
not going to
mean,
like steal petty cash from the company.
Right. You don't have
There's no petty cash to steal.
let me restate. The perception of risk, I think, will be lower among software development employers compared to other employers that, for example, send people into homes of pearl clutching people. You know, people who had sensitivities to that. You know, you're not going to be surrounded by the petty cash, like Jamison said, and so on. So it's like. Yeah, I mean, and frankly, I have hired people with criminal past, and I have just no problem with it for those people. It didn't concern me whatsoever. Maybe that's because they had a really good story. But anyway, I do believe this is a great industry for that, because a lot of the reasons, whether fake or justified or not, that people put up for not hiring people with a criminal history are actually not that relevant in software development. We have tons of criminals. I mean, just look at look at all the billionaires.
Just look at Web3.
Yeah. I've been resisting making mention of FTX.
I'll make them. I'm sure there are good people that work in crypto, but
or the Theranos.
There's Yeah, I mean, that could be an option. Go work in crypto where your criminal past is an asset.
Yeah, go work in finance, crypto, any number of opportunities for you. Okay. Have we answered the question?
We've insulted an industry enough.
I'm so sorry.
I know people who are not criminals who work in crypto, but also most of the criminals that I am aware of in the technology industry seem to be working in crypto. So just saying.
Oh boy.
All right. What should people do if they want their own questions answered?
Okay, go to softskills.audio and click the Ask a Question form. Thank you so much to everyone who asks us questions every week. We love your questions. Please keep them coming. You should see the way Jamison's face lights up when he opens up the webpage with all the questions on it. Oh, it's like Christmas every week.
Maybe you can see it if you go to YouTube. We've got our shows posted up on there now, if that's a way for you to listen. And you want to see our heads and listen to our voices.
The most common reaction we get in the comments of the videos is, so that's what you look like. That is not at all what I thought you looked like.
Yeah, and it's never... You're so much more beautiful.
That's right.
Than I imagined. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you later.